Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I am Fatina Suha binti Rahmat from group Amicus Curiea. My friends and I will represent Puan Sri in this case. And in this video, we will discuss few things under negligence, which is duty of care, breach of duty and more. But I will explain the material facts of the case first. Then, we will go through 4 legal issues which will be presented by my other friends. Now we will start with the material facts of the case. One day, Puan Sri wanted to go to the members' sale day at Ayer Wansamaju. However, her driver being sick during that day. Then she decided to drive her BMW herself, even though she had not driven for a long time. While driving, she was very cautious and made sure that she only drove at 40 km per hour. Despite that she drove cautiously, when she driving through the Taman Melati Primary School where the limit is 20 km per hour, she glanced at a stall which led her to hit an old man who was crossing the road at the juncture. And to make things worse, it was drizzling at that time. That's all for the material facts of the case. We will proceed with the first legal issue which will be presented by Nuha. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatin, for the brief introduction, and now I'm going to proceed with the first issue, which is whether Puan Sri has duty of care towards the old man. So the current task to determine whether duty of care exists is governed by the House of Lords decision in Kaparu's case. This involves the court asking 3 questions. The first one is, was loss of the claimant foreseeable? Was there sufficient proximity between the parties? The third one is it fair, just, and reasonable to impose duty of care? So the first element is, was loss of the claimant foreseeable? So it must be shown that a reasonable person in the position of the plaintiff would have foreseen that the situation constituted a real risk to the defendant. So according to the precedent case, Mohammed, who was the driver, could reasonably foresee that his action by act of speeding would cause an accident to other road users. And in the current case, the injuries suffered by the old man was reasonably foreseeable consequence of the Puan Sri act, as she drove her car at 40 km per hour when the speed limit is only at 20 km per hour. And the second element is where there's sufficient proximity between the parties, which means close and direct relationship between the plaintiff and the defendant. So in this case, there is a close and direct relationship between Puan Sri and the old man, because both of them are road users, and Puan Sri as a driver are bound to take care of other road users, including the old man who was the president in this case. 40 km per hour, which she had exceeded the speed limit, and her attention was distracted because she glanced at the stop. So therefore, it is certainly fair, just, and reasonable for the court to impose a duty of care towards Puan Sri as her careless act caused the old man's injury. So as a conclusion, Puan Sri owed duty of care towards the old man.
Okay, for the second legal issue, it is whether Puan Sri has breached the duty of care towards the old man. After it was established that Puan Sri owes the old man duty of care, it is a must to identify whether Puan Sri has breached that duty. Breach of duty occurs when the defendant does something that is perceived to be below the minimum standard of care required of him, which is measured through the standard of a reasonable man. Reasonableness does not mean perfection. The reasonable man need not to be a model citizen, nor a perfect in every aspect. The usual norms and activity in a particular society or a particular profession will be considered in determining the reasonableness of defendant's conduct. A driver is not under duty to be a perfectionist in the sense of being able to anticipate other drivers acting in a negligent or irresponsible manner. However, he must not put out of consideration the teachings of experience as to the forms those fully commonly take. In determining the reasonable man's standard of duty of care, consideration may be given to several factors, in which in this situation we will discuss under magnitude of risks. where the degree of care required of the defendants must be weighed against the magnitude of risk or the degree of risk created by the defendant's conduct. As can be seen in Mamat's case, Mamat was speeding even though it was close to zebra crossing, and he used his phone while driving. Thus, it was obvious in that situation there was a high risk could happen on his behalf. Meanwhile, in Puan Sri situation, she was very cautious and made sure that she only drove at 40 km per hour, which means she had tried her best to avoid the accident despite the fact that it was drizzling at that time. Therefore, Puan Sri has not breached the duty of care towards the old man. Thank you. I will pass the floor to my friend Amalia.
The third element required in order to prove the establishment of negligence is causation. The issue arises here is whether the defendant could reasonably foresee that his or her actions may cause injury towards the plaintiff. The defendant will only be held liable if he had caused a damage which he could foresee in respect of his action, meaning that defendant will not be held liable for the damage which is too remote. Under the current test, which is reasonable foresight test, the defendant will not be held liable if the plaintiff could not prove the kind or the type of injury suffered by the plaintiff was reasonably foreseeable. The issue arises in the case of Puan Sri is that whether Puan Sri conduct will result in the injury of the old man. In the preceding case of Mamat could reasonably foresee that his act of speeding in front of the zebra crossing, which is he drove at 80 km per hour, will definitely cause an injury towards whoever crossing the road. That being the case, he hit the old woman. But unfortunately, in the case of Puan Sri it is similar, where Puan Sri had driven a little bit above the speed limit, which is she had driven in about 40 kilometers per hour in front of the school area, which the speed limit is 20 kilometers per hour. But however, it was stated in the facts of this case that Puan Sri has driven very cautiously, and actually 40 kilometers per hour means nothing compared to 80 kilometers per hour. But what makes it a quite major difference in the case of Puan Sri is that an old man suddenly, out of nowhere, crossed the road at the juncture in front of Puan Sri So, in applying the reasonable foresight test, Puan Sri could not reasonably foresee the injury suffered by the old man, what more the kind of injury suffered by the old man. So, in this case, it could be said that the injury suffered by the old man is too remote and it is not foreseeable. Therefore, that being the case, I would say that there is no causation in this case. I will pass the floor to my friend Ain that will raise a defense on behalf of Puan Sri
Okay, let's proceed to another legal issue, which was whether the old man has taken a reasonable care for himself and contributed to his own injury. This related with the contributory negligence, which means that the plaintiff failed to use a reasonable care for himself, for the safety of himself or his own injury, which then given rise to his injury or damage. In this case, there are matter of fact, which was the old man suddenly crossed the road using the juncture in front of Puan Sri we can raise 2 points, which was the first, the old man suddenly crossed the road. Secondly, the old man crossed the road using the juncture in front of Puan Sri which was not the zebra cross. We all know the government have provided the zebra crossing, especially in front of the school, for anyone to cross the road safely. If anyone not use the zebra cross that has been provided, it will fall under the road traffic rule 1959, rule 45, and 160/59, which means that rule for the pedestrian who did not use the cross will be summoned under the RM 300 ringgit. Okay. In contributor negligence, they have two requirements, which was first forcible. The old man can foresee that if he cross the road, he will contribute to his own injury. And another requirement is causation. Causation is under section 12 Civil Act, which was when any person suffer damage as the result partly of his own fault and partly of the fault of any other person. A claim in respect of that damage shall not be defended by reason of the fault of the person suffering the damage, but the damages recoverable in respect thereof shall be reduced to such extent as the court think just and equitable, having regard to the claimant share in the responsibility for the damage. Okay. In conclusion, we can see that if the old man not use the juncture, he will not contribute to his own injury. If he use the zebra cross that have been provided in front of the school, he will not having injured for himself. So we can say that the old man have been fault in this issue. So that's all for me. Thank you.
As for the defences, Puan Sri shouldn't be liable in this case on the basis of voluntary non-fit injuria, which means the plaintiff who is the old man has consented or voluntarily assumed the risk of injury based on his act. In this case, the old man using the juncture to cross the road, and that omission contradicted with the usual norm, which is by using the zebra crossing. This clearly shows the elements of voluntary non-fit injuria. The old man suddenly crossed the road at the juncture. He must know that the juncture is not designated as a crossing path. The reason why is because some parts of the juncture can become a blind spot for some vehicles, and it is very dangerous that someone may get hit if not fully careful. In this case, the old man is aware and has fully concerned about the risk while crossing the juncture. He also voluntarily crossed the road without being coerced by anybody else. And lastly, he has sufficient knowledge about the risk itself. So, when he wants to cross the road, he must know that there are many vehicles on the road. Therefore, if he is still willing to cross it, he should ensure that the road itself. Unfortunately, he just instantaneously went through the road, and as a result, he get hit by Puan Sri. In the precedent case of Mamat, the doctrine of voluntary non-fit injuria could not be applied because the old woman in that case who crossed the road by using the zebra crossing did not assume the risk of injury since she was using the legal path to cross the road. She must assume that other road users will aware, slow down and then stop their vehicles when she crosses the road. This is in fact contradicted with the current case where the old man used an illegal path to cross the road. So the old man can't assume that other road user, which is Puan Sri, will notice him and stop her car to let him pass by. So it is clearly proved that voluntary non-fit injuria apply in this current case because the old man can assume the risk of injury in the first place.